Beat 7'3" out of Connecticut. Jim Calhoun told me the player he most improved on pretty much in his 29 years in coaching. That was the beat. Blake Griffin right there. The Oklahoma coaching staff told me when I watched Blake Griffin work out in November that the reason this kid would be so special is because of his work ethic, and you see it right there. An array of moves down low, but again, the biggest motor in college basketball. He's number one. The game changer defensively, Hasheem Thabeet. Think Samuel Dalembert from the Philadelphia 76ers with better hands. That's what you're getting with Thabeet. Some people say a more athletic Mutombo. I see Samuel Dalembert with better hands. He's a better athlete than Mutombo. Let's cut the guy some slack. No offense to Dikembe.
All right, so that you're talking about Thabeet, so you're comparing it to him. What about Griffin? What NBA player reminds you of him?
Well, this is some big company, and I don't want to put this guy on the spot like this, but when you look at his athleticism, he reminds me a lot of Antonio McDyess before he hurt his knee in Denver. When I saw him early on, I saw a lot of Carlos Boozer in him, but I think his athleticism, his ability to get a spring on his jump shot, there's so much Antonio McDyess in Blake, but again, it's his athleticism. You don't always see that for a big man.
Now, the point guard position is very interesting because Chris Duhon signed just a 2-year contract, so he's going into his second year of his contract. We saw that he did get beat up quite a bit, playing all of those minutes in the first half of the season. Kelly Tripucka said earlier, pretty solid first half of the season, though Duhon surely was the team MVP. So this could very well be the point guard of the future. What point guards are you looking at the top of their class right now?
Ty Lawson plays like Raymond Felton. He won a national championship at North Carolina. He even kind of looks like Raymond Felton. He's on the list. Johnny Flynn of Syracuse, a dynamite jet out of a rocket from upstate New York. Ricky Rubio, a little bit of Steve Nash out of Spain, and Brandon Jennings. When you want to talk about a guy on a yo-yo on the southpaw, he's got so much Kenny Anderson in his game. You see Ty Lawson right there, undersized. A little bit at 5'11". The only difference between him and Raymond Felton is there's about 2 inches in height. That could be a problem defensively when you're talking about defending other point guards. 4 to 5 Big East coaches told me they saw so much Chris Paul in Johnny Flynn. But Johnny Flynn's pull-up game reminds me of Chris Paul and his ability to get to the rim, as you see right there. But he still turns the ball over too frequently, I think, to be compared to Chris Paul. He needs to kind of recalibrate the way he runs an offense and how many turnovers he has in the basketball game.
There's so much intrigue out there about Ricky Rubio. What other little insight can you give us about him?
He's just so crafty. He has such a great feel for the game, and he's only 18 years of age. But at the same time, the NBA scouts I've talked to have told me this. Considering the fact that he is so young and his body is still brittle, he needs to really bulk up and be better defensively in terms of strength. So that could be a red flag. But in terms of craftiness and feel for the game, I don't think you have any doubts about Ricky Rubio's ability.
Now, you said that Ty Lawson reminds you of Raymond Felton. What about Johnny Flynn, an NBA guy we could sort of associate him with?
Chris Paul is one to think of because of his athleticism, but I also think if you want to throw back the clock a little bit, remember Terrell Brandon with the Minnesota Timberwolves, a guy who could bring the ball up the floor and at the same time dominate with the pick-and-roll game. Johnny Flynn on a pick-and-pop, lethal as he did all year in the Big East.
All right, the New York Knicks traded midseason for Larry Hughes. He was set to predominantly play the 2-guard position. It took him a little while to get his feet under him, and then he was injured down the stretch of the season. Let's talk about some of those 2 guards that could be available in the draft.
Why don't we start on Beale Street? Because I don't know if it's about you, but I kind of have a yen for some barbecue food when we get out of here. Tariq Evans, a bigger, bolder O.J. Mayo. Gerald Henderson, a dynamite one from Mike Krzyzewski and Duke. And James Harden, the southpaw from the desert in Arizona State. All right, Tariq Evans, John Calipari told me in the fall that he would be the best layup shooter he's ever coached. But you see right there, he had the NBA body, and he also never shies away from the spotlight. This guy played the point guard position when Memphis was 6-3. The Tigers won 27 in a row. He doesn't shy away from the spotlight. We go to Gerald Henderson right there in Durham. Coach K told me in February that Gerald Henderson would be a more athletic Dwayne Wade in the NBA. I see him as a more athletic Michael Finley. Somewhere in between, we'll take. James Harden, I got into an argument today, Tina, with an NBA scout because pretty much the NBA scout told me that he saw James Harden as a poor man's Jalen Rose. I said, yeah, really poor man's. Because I think Herb Sendek's system, granted, slows some people down. It doesn't let guards kind of play at a frenetic pace where they can play up and down and really get to the basket. But when I look at James Harden, I don't think he's going to be able to manufacture offensively what he was able to do in college in terms of getting to the basket. Some people, like the person I spoke to today, who's a scout for a Western Conference team, said Jalen Rose. I see more of a lefty, Aaron McKee, who excelled under Larry Brown in Philadelphia in the early part of the 2000-2001 season.
Now, these wings are really the top of their class. Who would fit into the Mike
Tariq
D'Antoni?
Evans.
Okay, you don't even have to ask
Tariq
that
Evans.
question.
Up and down system, he would flourish. But I also think somebody that's going to come to New York and play for the Knicks has to embrace the spotlight. And last year, we saw a guy in Derrick Rose lead Memphis to a 38-2 record and play for a national championship. Tariq Evans entered a team this year that had Antonio Anderson and Robert Dozier, two senior players that were the winningest players in the history of college basketball, and he was the cornerstone. He was the core. So Tariq Evans won't shy away from the spotlight. And ironically enough, I mentioned him as a bigger, bolder O.J. Mayo, but think back to Mike D'Antoni's first year with the Phoenix Suns. He had a guy that made his living under D'Antoni. His name was Joe Johnson. A lot of similarities because they're both 6'6", they can post up, and they can handle. Tariq Evans, though, needs to recalibrate the jump shot.
So now Joe Johnson's name always comes up when people start talking about the free agents. They can get this kid. They don't have to worry about a Johnson, right?
Well, we'll save that for another time. But I'll tell you, Tariq Evans right now, the jump shot needs a little bit of work, but in terms of readiness to contribute and in terms of having his game translate better to the NBA, I see a lot of similarities in what we saw to O.J. Mayo coming into Memphis last year and O.J. Mayo dynamite in year one on Beale Street.
Who do you think is flying under the radar right now? There's a sleeper out there, a second-round kid that could really bring some talent?
Well, the last impression wasn't a good one, and you got to tip your hat to Tom Izzo and Michigan State because they slowed Louisville down in the Elite Eight, and they took Terrence Williams completely out of his game. But at the same time, Rick Pitino told me prior to last season and during the season that in an up-and-down system, Terrence Williams could be at his apex. And I think when you consider the fact of the style Mike D'Antoni plays, the way he has his players run up and down, there could be a player like Terrence Williams that could flourish in this system. In other systems where you see half-court offense take more of a dominant role, he might not be as fluid offensively. But Terrence Williams, make no doubts, would flourish under Mike D'Antoni.
All right, so our college basketball insider, John Rothstein, thanks so much for the information.
Thank you, Tina.